Here are some people who have recently donated: William from New Jersey, Aaron from Nebraska, Albert from Chicagoland, John from Louisiana, Kevin from Pennsylvania, Thomas from Georgia, Robin from New York City, Schubert from Illinois, Wade from Minneapolis, Brandon from Illinois, Kenneth from Seattle, Amy from Poughkeepsie, Carl from San Francisco. Thank you all so much. And now we're bringing on Ryan from Washington, D.C. Ryan Grimm, a Washington editor at The Intercept and author of a brand new book, which is right there on the shelf, strategically placed. It's called The Squad. And Ryan, my former boss, thank you for being here and helping us out with this telethon.
You got it. First time caller, long time listener. I've got a question and I'll take my response off the air.
Oh, nice. Well
Yeah.
done. I believe you sent me the book to a place where I am not at right now. So I have not had the pleasure of reading all of the
Oh,
squad,
oops.
but I have listened to all the deconstructed episodes. Brian's got a great kind of audio version of the book that goes well beyond what a normal audio book is like, because he added in clips and sound bites and things like that remark upon the history that he's retelling. So I urge people to go over to Deconstructed, which is at theintercept.com, and check that out. You can get the first three segments right now. And so from what I've read, and I've read other things, it comes out at a really almost the perfect moment. This book comes
Yeah.
out in terms of what the debate is like in the country right now on some of the top issues. One of the things you write about is this idea in the Bernie campaign, where in 2016 Sanders is talking about economic justice, really, in a very targeted way, but the public, which is scarred, particularly younger people who are scarred by the after effects of the Great Recession, the very slow recovery, has sort of given up on economic renewal and are looking toward things like social issues as the way that they can make progress in a gridlock Congress, and that's sort of the focus of their organizing efforts. And I'm wondering, like, to what extent do you see that now? Like, is that what we can take away as the reason for why this particular situation in Gaza is getting so much attention from the progressive left, from the activist left?
I think part of it is that what's going on in Gaza is unique. Like it is like
Sure.
multiple degrees different than the kinds of wars that we're used to seeing in our lifetimes. Now, uh, I think the Iraq War, obviously was a greater scale, but like there was a year and a half lead up to that, and it's like the biggest country in world history with the most powerful military bringing everything to bear on a
Sure.
tiny country. So it was a little more expected, but this, I think part of it is like that it is different, but I think you're not wrong in the sense that there is a lot of d- desire for change. There's a lot of energy out there, and it is hard for people to find ways to channel it in the last couple of years. But I also think the rise in unionization that we've seen, the worker militancy,
Mm-hmm.
is a place where the kind of feelings that people had in during Occupy leading into the Bernie
Right.
Sanders campaign, that a better material world was possible,
Mm-hmm.
are now being given an opportunity because of like the full employment and the ability, like people feel more confident in the
Right.
workplace, that if
Right.
they, because back in 2010, 2011, if you lost your job, you might spend 9 months unemployed, and it's just
Right.
impossible. It's like impossible for some people to get their minds back to that place. um
Yeah.
and how soul crushing of an experience it is to go through long stretches, even short stretches of unemployment, but long stretches of unemployment that come with like a complete collapse of living standards, running through your savings, running through your retirement, moving back
And
in with your parents, like whatever it is.
Well, and then the interesting thing about that is the story, you center this story in the first real winner of the squad, Alexandria Ocasio-Cortez, and her story kind of tracks what you just
Hmm.
said in
Yeah.
many ways. I mean, talk about
Yeah.
that.
Yeah. It's really interesting. She went to college right around the time of the Great Recession, financial crisis, and graduated in '07 or '08. Um, her father died while she was still in college, which put their home at risk, like amid
Right.
the foreclosure crisis. Like 2009 and 10 saw what 2.5 million, was it 2.5 million foreclosures, or like like
Well,
it
if you the amazing thing is we don't count. We
right,
don't count how many foreclosures there are, which should
right,
should tell you quite something
just
about
massive
our
numbers. And
yeah.
so her mother was forced into raising two kids with multiple jobs, trying while with collapsing property values. And then when she graduated college, she graduates into the recession. And so where in previous generations, you know, white collar professional jobs were everywhere for people, she struggled like so many people so many millennials her age. Um, and she by the time she was 28 running for Congress, really just as a kind of messaging campaign in a lot of ways. You always, I'm sure, in the back of your mind, you always hope you have a shot. But
Right.
she wasn't an idiot. She knew she's taking on Joe Crowley, one of the most powerful members of the House, with basically no money behind her, and this kind of ragtag Justice Democrats.
And she's
Uh,
tending bar and she thinks like this is what I am. Like I'm a
right,
bartender.
right.
Like that's her identity at this point, even despite, having a college degree and all these ambitions. She feels like this is all that's available to me.
Yeah, she posted on Instagram something poignant where she said she felt like the train of her unfilled ambition had left the station or something like that. That like this is yeah that this is it. Like this
Yeah,
is like, and and that's the case for tens of millions of people who just
sure.
did not expect that this is where they would be, 10 years earlier.
And
Um,
I think at some level that's why people latched onto that story, right?
mhm,
And latched onto this idea that there's this sort of break in the firmament. This is not the normal politician that you see that rises through the ranks and, comes fully formed into
mhm,
Congress. And a lot of the squad members, while many of them did come from politics and did come from and do have that story. Ayanna Pressley sort of has that story. Ilhan Omar was a state legislator,
mhm,
but it felt different, right? And
mhm.
maybe it's because AOC was in the front of that.
Yeah, and then also you saw all these efforts on the right to like find out what the fraud was or what the scam was,
Right.
because we just can't accept things for like what they actually seem to be. And we also have this very like Dickensian idea of poverty, that unless you literally were raised in an orphanage, begging for a second bowl of oatmeal, then or porridge or whatever they were calling it
Mhm.
back then, um, then you don't really have a rags to riches story. You can't say you came up from your bootstraps. So people would like flag that she went to like a decent public
Right.
high school,
Right.
or that her dad had been an architect at one point, or whatever else they would point to say like this is not she was not living in a Dolly Parton like one room house without running water. So
Right.
this doesn't count. This and this
Right.
and also it
Right.
must be like the work of George Soros, like
Right.
because nobody could like if it you know either A, it's not true, or B, it is true, and then she's a puppet for like George Soros. Like those are the only
Right.
two possibilities. It's not possible that like somebody could have a genuinely like decent like middle to lower middle class, or even middle class before her father passed away,
Right.
upbringing, and then have the world collapse around them amid a great financial crisis, and then some people emerge from that rubble and get elected to Congress. Like that just seemed a thing that they weren't ready to believe.
Yeah.
Or I guess
Yeah.
they just had because it's easier to just not reckon with, I guess, reality.
Sure. I want to say once again, prospect.org/telethon. That's where you can donate. We've raised just about a third of our goal, our end of year goal, which is $200,000. So we're thank you once again for your support. Uh, Ryan, and then, the reason why this story and this book feels so timely is that we're in this point of tension with respect to the Gaza war. And we've seen already how this played out politically in 2020 and 2022, in particular in primaries, where AIPAC and Democratic Majority for Israel raised huge amounts of money to, what they were doing in those races was really trying to block more members of the
Mm-hmm.
squad from coming in. What they seem to want to do in this next cycle is to take those existing members of the squad out.
Yeah.
And so, uh, talk about just sort of how, what we're really talking about here when we're dealing with this. And it seems to me that the effort in 2022, you almost have to say that APAC read the situation correctly. I mean, with the benefit of hindsight, that if there were more progressive members right now in Congress who weren't, knocked down by this flood of money, that there would be a much stronger response coming from those parts of the House Democratic caucus in terms of what is happening right now in Gaza.
Yeah, and I zero in on the book in this moment in May of 2021 when uh, the second last time that Israel launched a bombing campaign
Right.
against Gaza, and Mark Pocan, former co-chair of the CPC, booked in who has become like the number one kind of, what would you call it, tangler with APAC online. Like
Yes.
he's just constantly
Yes.
like haranguing, and he has said like, I feel like I am in a position, not being a woman of color, um, that
Hmm.
I can really kind of speak more forcefully to them, and
Right.
that because they focus so much of their energy on women of color. He's like, so therefore, I'm going to take the opportunity, and he just constantly calls them every name in the book
Right.
for what they do. And so he organized an hour of floor time
Right.
in the house, and invites anybody who wants to come down and speak out against the 2021 war in Gaza.
Right.
And in the past, before the squad had gotten to Congress, you might hear from Betty McCollum, who represents a district near Ilhan
Hmm.
Omar in Minnesota. You might hear sometimes from Andre Carson, who from Indiana,
Who's
but not.
a Muslim
And
member of
he's
Congress.
one of the only Muslims,
Yeah.
black Muslim, um, uh, and um, that'd be about it for the most part. You're not gonna, and it's not gonna be super loud. Um, but on this day, you just had Democrat after Democrat. So it's not just it's one thing if like the four squad members go down there
Right.
and give speeches and move on. It's another thing if like you got Betty McCollum going down and saying something about how Israel shouldn't. Her big thing was like the U.S. It's like the lowest thing you could ask for. The U.S. should not be spending its own money to detain Palestinian children without charges. Like that's the
Right.
like, how about
The
that?
floor, the
Yeah,
baseline. Yeah.
how about we do that and still radioactive, like
Right.
absolutely a radioactive position. Um, but it was the combination. So it was you had them, but then you had more than a dozen members, going to the floor, giving very impassioned speeches against what was going on in Israel and that in Gaza, and that creates more space. Then it draws media coverage, but then it creates more space for other rank and file Democrats
Right.
who actually haven't necessarily, like Jim Himes. I don't know if you saw this recently, but somebody recorded a conversation where he'd had with like a local, or maybe it was a
Hmm.
national, maybe it was CARE or the local CARE chapter or something,
Hmm. Hmm.
where he said, "Look, I get APAC in my office a couple times a year. I've never had a pro-Palestinian group ask for a meeting, period.
Hmm.
And APAC is very good at like raising money and spending money. Everybody knows that they're going to reward people that are with them. They're going to hit people that aren't. And as
Right.
Himes put it, the path of least resistance is just saying, I stand with Israel.
Right.
And as long as there's no resistance to that, as you know, members of Congress have a lot of difficult decisions to make. If a decision is not difficult to make, they're going to make the easy one, and just say
Yeah.
I stand with Israel. Now all of a sudden you've got more than a dozen members of Congress going down, speaking out against what's going on. That makes it a live political issue. That
Right.
forces other Democrats to then start thinking about where they stand on this, and now the conversation's a live one, and it's a conversation that Israel is going to lose when it comes to the occupation or when it comes to the blockade or when it comes to indiscriminate bombing. These aren't the kinds of things that in a level debate in a Democratic primary among voters are going
Right.
to stand. It's just not going to work.
Right. But that was 21,
Right.
and
So you have to
then
you have to not have that
so
conversation.
they came in
Yeah.
with a totally different conversation in 22,
Yeah.
knocked out some new progressives who would have added to that debate.
Mm-hmm.
And now in 24, you have a lot of members of Congress who are just terrified of
Right.
having APAC come after them. $100 million is the claim
Yeah.
that APAC's going to bring to bear on Democratic primaries in 2024. Ryan, unfortunately, we're out of time. The book is The Squad. I don't remember the subtitle right now. Why don't you give
A-
it to me?
AOC and the hope of a political revolution. And let me say, you guys had a great year, a tremendous amount of reporting.
Thank you.
Often jealous of the scoops that the analysis that you guys have. So I would strongly encourage people to, help you meet that goal.